Himanshu, here we are talking about evolution and innovation, how these companies are thriving great on their technology supremacy. As a CA, what are the challenge you face while valuing a particular startup who's backed with a patent or they have a path-breaking technology?
So this whole the concept of valuing a startup has been something which everybody agrees that it is something which nobody can define how it is being done, right? Uh, and everybody kind of reconciles with the fact that beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder is the statement which makes sense. So whatever is a new investor willing to pay from whatever his vision about that startup's activities or the likely success of that startup, and that is what he's willing to pay. So the old metrics of valuation, which we applied normally for all other businesses of saying that can we define some kind of an asset-based value or some kind of a future cash flow-based valuation is all kind of gone out of the window right now. While of course for regulatory reasons, you still need to have certain valuation methodologies which are prescribed by law. For example, if you are getting foreign investment, then you need to have a valuation report as per the guidelines provided under FEMA. Or if you are taking any money or there is a secondary sale of any shares that is happening, then the tax rules require that the valuation is done as per certain methodologies. But generally, as a valuer for startups, I think most people are valuing it today based on the future potential of that startup, and that is, as we said, a very kind of loosely defined thing or something which is in the abstract, depending on the thoughts of the investors. And sometimes based on the market as well, to say that there are comparables in the market and what are they getting valuations at, what are the multiples that they are talking about, and they are all like huge multiples, right? They are not our typical like 20 multiple of the profit, because there are no profits first of all to start with. So it is all based on a revenue multiple or a customer number and those kind of metrics that are being used. But at the end of the day, the goal is to come to some sense of trying to justify why we are valuing a company the way it is being valued. And then depending on the stage of the startup, right? Today there are startups which have raised capital from multiple investors in multiple rounds, and
Mhm.
the capital is itself a complicated cap table if you look at it. So different investors come in at with different rights at different points of time. There is typically something called as a distribution waterfall or a liquidation preference that gets negotiated by every new round of investor. So while a company may be valued in a particular way, but some of the shares may be valued slightly differently as compared to the overall company valuation. So while the total value may be the same, but the share value for one investor may be different than the share value for another. And there are different methodologies that are available to try and justify that valuation. So for startups, while at a very, very fundamental level, it can be a very simple valuation. And as per the foreign exchange rules, if you are setting up a new company, you don't even need a valuation. You just say that, okay, this is a new company and this is the value per share, which is just the base value. But from a commercial perspective, there are multiple ways of valuation, and it is all dependent on the stage of the company and the future value that the investor perceives.
Hmm. The full future value the investor perceives. All right, and what about the role of IP assets, for example, patents or trademarks? Uh, do they also attract some investment, or do they help investor to put some more dollar or some put some more zeros to the check?
Certainly. I mean, IP is whether it is a balance sheet IP that some startups or some companies have accounted for it and put a certain value to it and keep on adding to it based on the efforts, like a software company or a product company that is creating something, or even a know-how IP, right? Today, with so many SaaS companies that you are creating a process, you are creating a know-how, which may or may not be on the balance sheet, but just the intellectual know-how that the company possesses is what is valued, and that is actually the value that the investor is paying for, right? Today, of course, the people, the persons running the company, their own value is one thing. But also this know-how that is generated over a period of time, the learning experience, whether you capture it on the balance sheet or separately, is something that is always a value intangibly that is taken into account by the investors. Plus, whenever there is any transaction, so today what happens is that in many cases you might have seen that there are a startup which may be set up in India, they may be thinking of moving to an overseas jurisdiction and setting up a shop there because to
Correct.
attract other foreign investors to expand overseas. And one question that always typically comes up is that if I do need to migrate my IP, that whatever is the value that I think it is worth today, if I have to migrate it to an overseas jurisdiction, then how do I transfer it and what are the issues around that? And then we do need to get into specific IP valuation if that is already on the balance sheet and if there has been a discussion on valuing that IP in some shape or form. So if you're transferring that, then certainly India will expect that somebody will pay for that value, and then you need to get a proper registered value that IP. But otherwise, as part of most transactions, this is kind of baked in into the overall valuation, whether you call it goodwill, whether you call it know-how, whether you call it as technology, whatever way you call it. But somewhere or the other, I think this is a key ingredient, especially for startups, which is deriving value for everyone.
Right. Excellent. I mean, we do not still have some set methodology to derive a proper valuation for it. And you rightly pointed out that the valuation lies in the future growth in terms of what the investor feels for that particular company while he's putting his money out. So that's great piece of advice and lot many technical informations, Himanshu, you gave out. I'm sure people who are watching us or would be watching us post this session would love to take notes from your thoughts. Thank you so much, Himanshu, for sharing that.